You know, when we think of horror movies, we usually picture monsters, ghosts, all that spooky stuff. But you'd be surprised, some of the scariest ones don't have any of that. Today I'm gonna be talking about The Strangers from 2008, and it's not about demons or creatures from the beyond. It's terrifying because it could be real. It's like it could actually happen to you or me. Let me break down the true story behind The Strangers for you. So this is a 2008 American psychological horror film Bryan Bertino wrote and directed. It kicks off with a young couple fresh from a wedding reception only for things to take a terrifying turn when the proposal doesn't go quite as planned. So yeah, she said no. Scott Speedman plays James Hoyt and Liv Tyler stars as Kristen McKay. So they get home late at night only to have their peaceful evening shattered by some unexpected visitors. What follows is a night of pure horror as James and Kristen try to survive against three crazy attackers who have targeted them for no reason other than the fact that they were home. While James and Kristen from the film aren't based on real individuals who met such a terrible fate, the whole story draws from seriously unsettling real-life events. So this is the first in the Strangers film series. Fast forward to 2018 and we've got The Strangers Pray at Night. This time it's a family of four staying at a secluded mobile home park who find themselves in the awful hands of the same three mysterious strangers. So now, in 2024, we have the film The Strangers Chapter 1, serving as the third film in the Strangers film series created by Bertino. So this is the first installment of a new trilogy of standalone films, where Chapter 1 will follow a similar premise to the first film, and it takes place in the same continuity as the first two installments, acting as a prequel to the first film. It's about a couple on a road trip innocently booking an Airbnb for the night only to find themselves haunted by masked killers. Talk about a nightmare, man. The next movies in the trilogy are going to dive deep into the characters' experiences, showing how surviving such horror affects them. And they're finally going to reveal who these mysterious killers are and where they came from. I think this is a bold move, but man, I'm here for it. So instead of sticking to the mysterious, motiveless vibes of the original, these next two films are going deep into the backstory of the strangers. Now, while the original movie drew inspiration from true events, it's unclear if the new trilogy will follow suit. I'm sure there have been some creepy incidents at Airbnb rentals that could have sparked some ideas, but the focus shifting towards uncovering the truth about the killers, any real-life stories will probably just serve as loose inspiration. Now, what you all came here for. The idea for the original film came from real-life events. Bertino, the writer and director, was inspired by the Manson Family Tate Murders and some break-ins from his childhood neighborhood. And some journalists see similarities with the Keddie Cabin Murders. Bertino didn't actually reference that, but I'm still gonna talk a little bit about that case. This was only the third screenplay Bertino ever wrote. He grew up watching horror flicks from the 70s, and that's what inspired him to write The Strangers. He wanted to make a movie that made you feel like you were right there with the characters freaking out. He actually entered the screenplay for The Strangers into a contest, and after that, Universal Pictures picked up the rights to direct it. Wild. So the whole idea for the movie came from something that happened to Bertino when he was a kid. He lived in this house in the middle of nowhere, and one night while his parents were out, some strangers knocked on the door. His little sister answered, and they were asking for someone who doesn't even live there. Bertino found out later that these people weren't just lost or looking for directions. Nope, they were actually robbing houses in the neighborhood, targeting places where nobody was home. So it's kind of like the reverse of The Strangers, where danger comes when you are already at home. Even though Bertino's experience didn't involve the same kind of violence as the movie, it definitely left a lasting impression on him. It's like that feeling you get when you realize how close you came to something really scary happening. And for Bertino, well, I guess that was it, and that memory eventually became the main idea for The Strangers. So as I said before, Bertino was influenced by true crime stuff, mainly the Manson Family Murders. So, Charles Manson was this charismatic but totally twisted dude who formed a cult called the Manson Family, who they eventually killed 28 people. Now, Manson was convinced that there was gonna be this massive race war between black and white people, which he called Helter Skelter, after the Beatles song. He thought this war would bring down society with black people coming out on top, and he and his followers planned to hide out in the desert during the chaos and then emerge as leaders afterwards. So, to kickstart this whole crazy plan, Manson and his followers went on a killing spree. One of the most notorious crimes they committed was the Tate Murders in 1969, where they broke into the house of actress Sharon Tate, who, by the way, was pregnant at the time, and some of her friends were there too. And it was this random and brutal attack. They killed Sharon and her friends in this really gruesome way. They were stabbed multiple times, shot, and beaten, and it's said that Sharon was even hanged. Now, Manson and his crew thought they could pin these murders on black radicals and spark this race war that they were so obsessed with, but thankfully they were caught and Manson himself ended up behind bars. So it's just insane how twisted people's minds can get. I'm gonna be making a video on the whole Charles Manson story, so make sure to subscribe if you wanna see it. But for now, we'll be focusing on what the inspiration for the film was. So Bertino even read Helter Skelter for inspiration, which is this book called Helter Skelter, The True Story of the Manson Murders, and it's written by Vincent Bugliosi and Kurt Gentry. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And Vincent was the lead prosecutor in the Manson trial, and Kurt Gentry was an American author and journalist. So this book is like the ultimate deep dive in the whole Manson family saga. It's really detailed and it covers everything from Charles Manson's background to the gruesome murders, investigation, and the trial. So it's basically the go-to book if you want to know all about the dark side of the 60s. So the Tate Murders and the film share several eerie similarities to add to the unsettling nature of both. So first we have the home invasion. Both incidents involve brutal home invasions where unsuspected victims are attacked in their own homes. So as you already know, in the Tate Murders, members of the Manson family broke into the home of actress Sharon Tate and her friends, while in The Strangers, a couple's isolated vacation home is invaded by masked attackers. Then we have the random targeting. In both cases, the victims are chosen seemingly at random. So the Manson family's choice of the Tate residence was not based on any personal connection to the victims. However, it is believed that the Manson family chose the residence primarily because it had been previously rented by music producer Terry Melcher, who had rejected Manson's aspiration of a music career, and the killers in The Strangers target the couple simply because they are home without any apparent motive. Now for the violent attacks. Both events involved violent attacks resulting in multiple deaths. The Tate murders were particularly brutal, with the victims being subjected to stabbing, shooting, and beating. Here goes a spoiler. Similarly, in The Strangers, the masked intruders torment and terrorize the couple before ultimately killing them. For the sense of fear, both the Tate Murders and The Strangers evoke a prevalent sense of fear and helplessness. The victims in both cases are caught off guard and unable to defend themselves effectively against the sudden and ruthless attacks. And lastly, for the lack of closure, perhaps most notably, both events leave lingering questions and a sense of unresolved horror. The Tate Murders shocked the world and raised unsettling questions about the nature of evil, while The Strangers leaves audiences with a similar sense of unease as the motives of the attackers remain unclear. You can really feel the spooky similarities between what actually happened and what's portrayed in the film. When Tex Watson, one of Manson's followers, said the bone-chilling words, "I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's business," it sent shivers down the spine, much like The Strangers' haunting response in the movie, "Because you were home." Some folks think that The Strangers was also based on the Keddie Cabin Murders from '81, but Bertino didn't specifically mention that. In a small California resort town, 4 lives were brutally taken: Sue Sharp, her son John, daughter Tina, and John's friend Dana. On April 12, 1981, Sheila Smart returned home to the Keddie Resort in Northern California, only to stumble upon a scene of unimaginable horror. Her mother, brother, and a friend of her brother's had been brutally murdered, bound and subjected to a savage onslaught of strangulation, blunt force trauma, and stabbing. Adding to the tragedy, Sheila's sister was missing, and her fate remained a mystery until her remains were discovered 3 years later. The parallels between these real-life horrors and the events depicted in The Strangers are undeniable. In both cases, innocent victims are subjected to senseless violence by masked attackers, with no apparent motive other than the cruel twist of fate that led them to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, one glaring difference sets the Keddie Cabin Murders apart, and that's the emergence of new evidence in 2016 that strongly suggested a personal connection between the killers and their victims. The Keddie Cabin Murders remain officially unsolved, and to this day, no one has been convicted for the brutal killings. Despite extensive investigations and occasional developments, including new evidence and leads, the case still holds many unanswered questions. Various theories and suspects have been proposed over the years, but conclusive evidence leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrators has yet to emerge. So in the movie, as in real life, the strangers simply vanish into the morning mist after carrying out their atrocious acts, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions. But hey, for those of us who are into serial killers and true crime stories, it's hard not to wonder if there's a little bit of the Keddie resort mixed into the DNA of the strangers. Director and writer Bertino explained where he got the inspiration for the horror film in the original production notes released in 2008. Bertino shared how the details of those crimes caused him to become, quote-unquote, really fascinated with telling the victim's tale. Quote, I was thinking about the Tate murders and realizing that these detailed descriptions had painted a story of what it was like in the house with the victims, but none of the victims knew about the Manson family or why it was happening to them. So I got really fascinated with telling the victim's tale. The filmmaker wanted to encapsulate the idea of a random crime and not giving viewers any background information or why it was happening. Quote, as a writer, there wasn't anything I wanted James to do that I felt that I couldn't do. There was no amount of bravery. I tried to do a gut check. When we made the movie, Scott tried to do a gut check. I didn't want this movie to be about what would you wish you would do as much as what would you do. The film was shot on a $9 million budget in a rural South Carolina back in 2006. It was originally supposed to hit theaters in November 2007, but it got delayed. And finally, it made its way to the big screen on May 30th, 2008. Despite mixed reviews from critics, the film became a sleeper hit, ranking a whopping 82 million worldwide. It's no wonder it's gained a cult following over the years. It's understandable to think that James Hoyt and Christine McKay might have been real victims, given the eerie realism of the strangers, but in reality they're purely fictional characters crafted for the movie. Their stories serve as a vessel for the unsettling real-life murders that inspired the film. So, drawing inspiration from the Manson family, the movie paints a chilling picture of strangers donning masks and inflicting terror simply because their victims happen to be home. Bryan Bertino, drawing from his own life experience, captured a chilling reality that many people unfortunately face. The unsettling tactic of knocking on doors as a pretext for robbery or violence is all too real, highlighting the vulnerability that exists even within the supposed safety of one's home. But hey, let's keep an open mind. Maybe this new film will surprise us and add a whole new layer of terror to the franchise. Did you know these were the stories that inspired the film? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you guys liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, go follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you next week. Bye!